If you were to ask me to describe my taste in games, I would probably respond that it tends to lean a little bit arcadey. I'm a big fan of platformers, and that generally I prefer to keep my games mostly focused on gameplay. This is definitely accurate, but that's not to say that I can't also enjoy a more story-focused experience from time to time. That's certainly the case with the game we're going to be taking a look at today. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, one of the more compelling arguments one could make for video games as a storytelling medium. This one's been on my radar for a while. I first became aware of it when I saw it in one of My Life in Gaming's The Games We Played year-end review videos, and ever since I've had it in my back pocket for a time when I really wanted to just sink my teeth into a title with a heavy emphasis on immersion and visual fidelity. With the highly anticipated sequel releasing in just 8 days though, now seems like the perfect time to give it a try. So strap in, because I'm about to give you my official take on Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Set sometime in the 8th century, Hellblade puts you in control of the titular Senua, a young girl and picked warrior suffering from psychosis. While it's not exactly clear what's going on when you first start the game, you'll eventually learn that after a year spent in self-imposed exile, Senua returned to her village to find it devastated by a Viking raid, and her lover Dylan brutally murdered. Senua comes to believe that Dylan's soul has been stolen by the Norse god Hela, so taking matters into her own hands, she does the only logical thing and wraps his head in a burlap sack before embarking to Helheim on a rescue mission. As you progress on your journey to and through the Norse underworld, you'll be expected to solve light puzzles as well as contend with the occasional contingent of less than hospitable rabble-rousers. Like I said though, you don't actually know all of this going in. Instead, when you first load up, you're introduced to this game's other main characters, the voices in your head. As a result of her mental illness, Senua believes herself to be cursed, and as an extension of this, she is constantly vexed by a swarm of disembodied voices bombarding her with all different types of messages and observations. This is actually probably one of the game's most immersive features, if I'm being honest. The way these voices are implemented is absolutely exemplary. This is an experience you non-negotiably have to have with headphones on, because the developers have made excellent use of binaural audio to recreate the sensation of having someone speaking from just behind you or whispering something in your ear. It's the kind of thing you honestly just have to try for yourself to fully understand. I'm well aware that binaural audio is nothing groundbreaking, but if the way this game puts it to use doesn't immediately grab your attention, I would be seriously surprised. Something else likely to grab your attention is the visuals. Obviously, I kind of expected this going in, but this is quite the graphically impressive title, especially for something that was released 7 years ago now, if you can believe it. It runs well too. My 4070 had no trouble running this thing at 1440p, absolutely ultra settings, and pushing out 120 plus FPS. Obviously, from a pure fidelity perspective, the world looks incredible. I found the way they handle water to be particularly mesmerizing, for example. Something about it just looks very next-gen. But equally, if not more impressive, is the slew of visual effects you'll encounter on your journey, something we'll talk about more in depth a little later. Before we can really go any further, we need to talk about gameplay, but that's kind of easier said than done. Hellblade really runs the gamut, with sections at one end being slightly more involved and even featuring combat, contrasted with areas at the other end that are really more vaguely artsy experiences you have than something you play. In the middle though, everything kind of averages out to walking simulator with puzzle elements, and since that comprises most of the runtime, I guess we'll talk about that first. As Senua makes her way through her journey to Helheim, you'll be tasked with navigating her through a wide variety of desolate locations dripping with inspiration from primarily Norse mythology. Like many similar titles, Hellblade operates on a chapter select system, meaning the world can be broken up into distinct sections that feel unique without really having set levels that you're expected to complete. Taking a step back though, you'll see that the game is really broken up into 3 discrete phases. There's the Road to Hell, during which you'll have to enter the domains of and eventually defeat the gods Solter and Valravn. The Bridge to Hell, requiring you to take on 4 trials and confront a lot of personal baggage. And finally, there's Helheim itself, which, minor spoiler alert, from a gameplay perspective, basically turns out to just be a big cave system. As mentioned previously, in order to progress, you'll frequently be expected to solve small brain teasers. These most commonly come in the form of perspective puzzles, where you'll be given a shape and asked to align it with a similar shape you make out of the environment. These are probably my favorite. They always feel unique and make you think about your surroundings in out-of-the-box ways, so it's always an aha moment when you finally figure it out. These aren't the only type though. There are also a decent share of do things in the correct order puzzles that add some probably necessary variety. Having these short tasks thrown in to intersperse the walking and cutscenes is an excellent move in my opinion, and I particularly love the way they make you think about and interact with the environment around you, because instead of having puzzle solving and exploration interrupt each other and distract from the experience of one another, they work and blend together seamlessly in such a way that makes the whole game feel vaguely productive. Unfortunately, I don't have equal praises to sing of the combat. Okay, so Throughout the game, you'll occasionally be thrown into a brief combat scenario where you'll need to use your trusty sword to take down a shadowy soldier, barbarian, or other demonic-looking entity. I actually feel like the combat system in this game operates pretty similarly to the system in Assassin's Creed, with the blocks, counterattacks, and devastating final blows feeling markedly similar. It's not all the same though. You can alternate between fast and light or slow and heavy strikes, and importantly, you also have the ability to focus. Basically, you peep game and lock in, giving you a brief slow-mo mode that can be critical to coming out on top. For one-on-one encounters, this system works great, which is probably why the boss fights in this game are so good. These usually come at the end of a section or chapter, and are just you and Hellblade's satisfying swordplay versus a quick-moving and absolutely insane-looking god or monster with a complex pattern you'll need to memorize through trial and error. The problem is, this system rapidly breaks down when you introduce even one or two more concurrent enemies into the arena. You have very little control over who you're targeting. I know it probably isn't, but it feels basically random, which in practice means you're almost completely defenseless against anything that gets even vaguely behind you. I actually complained about this exact same thing in my Assassin's Creed video, not being able to turn around easily during combat, but in Hellblade it is 1,000 times worse. Baddies frequently gang up on you in a way that just feels fundamentally unfair. It's really not that big a deal, like, this doesn't really even happen until towards the end, and all things considered, there isn't even that much combat, but it's made all the more frustrating by a baffling decision the developers decided to make much earlier on. For some reason, they thought it would be fun to just lie to you. So, towards the beginning of your playthrough, you'll lose an unwinnable scripted fight, and shortly after, in what is the only instance of anything like this happening throughout the entire game, you'll get a heads-up display, straight-up tutorial text, that heavily implies that this title has permadeath, and if you die too many times, your save file will be deleted. In reality, though, this is just not a thing. No such mechanic exists. Now, the story is that supposedly this is actually foreshadowing for the end of the game, but they knew what they were doing. This alleged feature was the topic of much discussion leading up to and around release. The intention was to deceive the player. This would be fine, obviously, as a storytelling device, but the problem is, falsely believing that your save file is at risk makes some of the slightly more unfair fights you may encounter later on infinitely more frustrating. It feels pedantic, but it's just such an odd choice in my opinion to obfuscate that there are no consequences for dying in a title with its fair share of slightly scuffed deaths. Unfortunately, I feel like the amount Hellblade intrigued me gradually decreased as it went on, which seems pretty backwards. Don't get me wrong, there were awesome moments in every part of my playthrough. The Sea of Corpses, for example, was a standout visually, and some of the natural scenery midway through was absolutely gorgeous. I'll even grant that all 4 trials and the Bridge to Hell have really distinct and appealing art directions. This game does cool stuff throughout. With all that being said though, my absolute favorite area in the game, bar none, was Valravn's Keep. Its vaguely occult image conjuring motif and use of these gates through which the world is different depending on which direction you pass through comes together to create a truly one-of-a-kind experience. The whole place just feels deeply wrong. You're both completely isolated, and yet it seems you're constantly being watched. In my opinion, it was never topped, which is honestly a little disappointing because depending on which path you take, this is basically literally the first area of the game. By contrast, the very last area of the game, Helheim, is basically just a cave system / dungeon. It does some cool stuff, it's not terrible, but it seems to go on forever. It definitely outlasted my attention span, and it's just a little disappointing that a game with so many amazing ideas ends on its blandest note. The good news is, I don't feel like the game itself overstays its welcome. It'll take you just about 10 hours to make your way to the end, and in that time it manages to tell a really compelling story that, while notably sad, wraps everything up quite nicely with a vaguely optimistic ending that leaves plenty of room for expansion in the sequel. One thing that I really like is how Hellblade plays with the concept of an unreliable narrator. Due to Senua's illness, she suffers frequent hallucinations, and for this reason it's really unclear how much, if any, of the events of the game actually take place in the real world, and how many take place in Senua's head. One really cool thing they do with this is that the Furies, the voices in your head frequently whispering at you from all angles, actually tend to give pretty useful advice, and it seems clear that their commentary serves as an insight into the real world, as opposed to whatever twisted version you may be seeing through Senua's eyes. Honestly, I find it endlessly impressive that they were able to tell a story this detached from the typical rules of reality and with this much artsy ambiguity without making it feel annoying and while maintaining a strong sense of cohesion. At this point, you're probably wondering about achievements, and while this title has 14 of them total, only one of them actually requires you do anything other than finish the story. If you want 100%, you'll have to make sure to find and interact with 44 total lore stones scattered throughout the world. They aren't hard to find, most of them are laid out along the natural path of your progression, and they're an awesome collectible too, activating a short narration that expounds on some of the mythology that'll be helpful to your understanding of the game. The stories they tell are genuinely interesting. I would totally go out of my way to listen to them even outside of the achievement, and it's only mildly annoying that they get quieter as you move away from them so you can't keep playing while you listen. The only complaint I was planning to levy against the lore stones is that I spent my entire playthrough under the impression that this game had no chapter select system, which was really scary. I was going to talk about how if you missed even one collectible by leaving an area too early, you would have to start a new save file and play through potentially the entire game all over again just to get this achievement, which would have been hellish, and this very thought kept me fairly stressed throughout the process of tracking everything down. Turns out though, I just had out-of-date information. For some reason, 4 years after the game released, the developers went back and added a chapter select. So, good on them, I guess. With this feature in mind, I think the 100% completion process is really well done, giving completionists something to go out of their way for while not adding any unnecessary filler to an otherwise streamlined title. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and I definitely think it's worth checking out, especially given the fact that it's now available on pretty much every platform, if you think it's the kind of thing you'd be into. It's definitely not a flawless title, there are for sure some things that I would have handled differently, but it's a really unique experience that I feel like you have to have for yourself before you can truly appreciate it. I don't regret a minute of my 10.5 or so hours in Hellblade, and I'm really excited to see how they improve upon it in the sequel releasing just over a week from now. That is, of course, after it goes on sale. I don't pay $50 for games, do I look like I'm made of money? Anyway, I feel good putting this on my list of 100% completed games.
There we go. What did you think? The last several videos I've done have been pretty blanket positive, so it was nice to finally talk about a game that, while still majority positive in my opinion, I could really dive deep into with some criticisms. What about you though? Did you like the video? If you did, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Leave a like and get subscribed so you never miss a future upload. Not just that though, leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. Anybody else here excited for Hellblade 2, for instance? I would love to hear from you. I think that's all I've got for you today, so I hope to see you in the next one, and as always, thanks for watching.